Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Callow wanted to talk about something off air. Off air. Can't share that one on air.
No.
Do
It
it
was nothing. It
later.
was not. It was nothing like crazy or
Oh,
anything. So yeah, we're
do it
good.
later. Give the audience a chance to litigate what we talk about before we actually do this. No,
Yeah,
you don't want to do that.
our very long, detailed pre-show meetings about what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Don't tell
We
anybody. Don't tell anybody how the sausage is made, which is we just dump meat in a grinder and see what happens.
I mean, you and I are professionals. I can call myself a professional at this point.
Yeah.
We know how this works. We can get through this.
Yeah, maybe I should reinvent myself to force myself to have to think through some of those things I'm going to say before I do it. You're kind of doing the same thing a little too long. I've had a little bit of that. Post 50, I'm like, whoa, I'm still doing this. But I have the job I love. So to do anything in conjunction with it has to be around them. So I don't know how in the world I could get away from it. And I still love doing it. It's not that I don't. I don't.
I mean,
Yeah. But
I feel
I
like
agree with you. Like, we could probably put a little more effort into producing up the show if we really wanted to.
sure we
You don't
could.
really want those emails from me anyway, though, because that's what ends up that. And then we go, oh, we're doing that. Okay, here's the whiteboard. You want to get all the emails about all the people I want you to reach out to? We can start doing that if you want.
I mean, I'm happy to do that. We just only have an hour to fill these days, less than an hour to fill. So
Okay.
I'm just saying on that one. I will say this: you probably know how I feel. When I had to start doing a 2-hour show by myself, the stress that comes with that at the very beginning is very high. And we are almost a year in to what we switched to last summer. And now I'm conditioned to it. I don't have to prepare as much as I did a year ago, essentially. So, you get used to it. It's like sports. It's like running. It's like conditioning.
I have notes. I'm not winging it. I know what I'm like.
Yes, of course.
But, it's like you're not going to be surprised about what we're talking about today. I know that. But, we could probably go back to having a few more guests. But I just like talking. You know that. Like I've never really been into having a ton of guests on. I'll have them on when they're relevant or fill a need. Or if you're out, I like to have guests. I like to talk to somebody. I don't like to talk to myself. Right.
No, of course. No, I understand that. That's been the format of your show since I've known you, since we did the first iteration of this show. So yes.
That's right. Stream of consciousness. I've never gotten into doing formatted stuff. But, could we do a little bit more of that? Yeah, maybe. That's not what we were talking about beforehand. I think you were going to tell me beforehand that you were going to go do something in Orlando. And
no. I was actually, I can pull the curtain back. I was going to say, had you heard Josh Harris on the Deal podcast with A-Rod?
I have only heard clips. I have not heard the whole thing yet. I have only heard clips. Have you listened to the whole thing?
I've listened to most of it. It's very, very good. He actually comes across, not that I thought Josh Harris was dumb. Don't take this the wrong way. But he comes across as very, very smart in a business sense that
consider what he's doing, did, and clearly he's brilliant.
No, of course, but you tell me what the last ownership group was like when he talked about owning a business and what a business venture was like. Like, we never got that in depth, kind of like, he was just like, I like owning the Redskins. That's what that guy was anytime we heard him talk. And so this was just very refreshing to hear him talk about why he bought an NFL team, why it's profitable, why it's kind of bulletproof at the moment. You can go ask baseball why they're not bulletproof at the moment. So it was very good on that. He talks about buying the 76ers. I didn't know Philly was as sentimental. It's not as sentimental as here, clearly, but that area is sentimental to him. He talked about buying the Sixers in that sense.
Because of his main partner in that, right? Because the main partner, wasn't he like from Philly and it became a big thing about wanting to own the Sixers? Wasn't that part of it?
I think it was he and his dad. I might botch this. I think they both went to Penn.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Yeah, and they became big Sixers fans. Yeah,
and he said too, like it was something like he was raised in DC, but also was either born in Philly or grew up in Philly for a time too. So he was naming off all these old Phillies stars too. And so I actually, not Phillies, but 76ers stars. And so I actually didn't know he liked the 76ers like that, like the in-depth that he went in on that. And then he also just went really in-depth that I honestly, if you're a Commanders fan, that you'll love. He talked about how how you build a good sports organization is fan experience one. And of course, he spun that into RFK, and it was like an 8-minute spiel on why they need RFK, which I'm not here to disagree about, but it was just very refreshing to hear the owner, one, talk, because we know we used to not hear the owner talk here, but two, really, really put fan experience first. And he kind of took on what you have been saying for years. When you buy a sports team, it's a public trust. You're trusting somebody to, run this organization. And he literally was like, we're now in charge of this team's memories for all of these fans from here on out. And that's very, very important to me. And he's kind of said this and talked about it before, but it was just very nice to hear in depth and how he kind of tied it all into, once you take care of that, that's how you run your business. And it usually is a success. So it was just very nice to hear that he's running a business and we're first on the list, essentially.
Listen, the owners are supposed to make money. It is an investment to them. Of
course.
And so I never look past that's important. But if that's the priority, it's just the money making, you're backwards in thinking at what will be successful about this. You may win on the field, but you won't win off of it, as they like to say, right? As they used to like to say, winning on the field, off the field.
Yeah.
So really winning off the field is, what is the pervasive feeling about the organization? What standing does it have in your community? How do people attach themselves to it? Because, for me as a kid going to RFK or watching the games, I think a lot of people kind of feel this way, and it's probably the wrong comparison, but it felt almost like a religious experience. Like going to RFK Stadium was like going to a church, especially back in the day when they were good all the time. And there was just this kind of pervasive feeling of how important it is in everyone's lives. You interact through it. So it's a cultural touch point for everybody. And if your sole goal is to squeeze out as much money out of it as you possibly can, then you really shouldn't really be the owner of the team. You've lost sight of what it's about. But I don't put aside the only way you can have the good feelings about the organization is the ownership has to make money. This is not a charity, right? This is not a nonprofit 401k, I get that, I understand that, and it has to be done. But I do believe that if you give the people what they want, which is a great experience in and around it, win or lose, but a great experience in and around it, you will be rewarded for that. And therefore, I think that's how it goes hand in hand. And it is refreshing to hear it. And honestly, everything that they've done since they've taken over as the ownership group is essentially express and not just say it. They've put their money where their mouth is on all of these things. The success of the organization and the turnaround that they had in the short period of time is due to a lot of things. One of them is number 5, who I'll get to in a minute. They're very fortunate, that they drafted him. I think this could have happened with, it looks like, a couple other quarterbacks in this class, but maybe not to this point. He seems special, and they're very fortunate to have picked him, and he's their quarterback. Their coach turned out to be everything they could have asked for in trying to rebuild a chemistry. Their GM has a tremendous amount of experience in dynastic organizations and seems to be off to a really good start, reshaping the roster to try to put it in a position where they're going to be competitive over and over. There's just good vibes in and around the organization. Working, I heard Josh Harris said something like this in the one clip I did hear was how you really need to be a nice person, we want to work with people that want, that really are genuinely nice to other humans. And that's refreshing to hear, having been in and around an organization where that's my disposition in general. I'm just kind of a nice person to people. And I was in an organization for a long time where there were not a lot of those people around, and that's not just sports, that's media. So they weren't actually some kind of throwaway anomaly to a lot of experiences I've had in my career. There's a lot of media organizations where you're working with a lot of very not nice people who are not trustworthy at times. And so I've been accustomed to all of that, in and around this entire field, let alone just this one team. I never felt that they really stood out from some other places that I worked where, you're dealing with personalities, and some of these personalities are in positions. It was nice to hear Josh Harris say, we do value just being genuinely a nice human being. And that's an important thing. That was one of the clips I heard. I'll listen to the rest of this, but the other part that I think got overlooked a little bit with this turnaround, and I think you're pointing out, and I think you're hearing in this interview with him, and I'll listen to it now. I've been meaning to, but I'll listen to it now, is the effort, money, time, and thought process of what they've done to this point to try to improve the organization in many ways that you don't see. And I've talked about this, like, I'm out at the facility all the time, and in a month and a half, it'll be my life again, that I'll be out there every single day. The amount of work that they put in to fix that, to the degree that they could, based off of what have been the players' reactions to working in this environment. And there's only so much they can do because the footprint of the place is not modern. It's not big. They could expand it, but it would be awkward because of the way it's situated. If you've ever been there, it's kind of up on a hill and the fields are kind of low, and there's only so much they can do. There's only so much space that they have, but they've put in millions of dollars to try to make it better for everybody. They took out this dumb AstroTurf field. They didn't have to do that. They have 4 other fields. It's not like they had to do it, but they did it because the organization told them, let's get rid of this. 1, it's unsightly. 2, we can't use it. 3, it's just dumb. Let's just get rid of it. And they did. And they fixed all these pathways, which seems minor, but is very expensive. I haven't seen the new locker room yet. They're putting in a new locker room because the players wanted a new locker room. They have changed the dietitians. They've changed the chef. They have changed all sorts of things. Then if you go to the stadium, it's better. It'll never be great, and they need a new stadium. But they've done a lot to try to make it upgraded. They've spent millions and millions of dollars. Light shows, upgraded sound systems, some seating, food options, concourses look better. They're doing a tremendous amount of stuff that they're trying to show you. I described it when they bought the team as they paid $6 billion for a distressed property in a lot of ways. And they knew going in, they were going to have to spend a ton, let alone get the new stadium, whatever that's going to cost them, that they're going to have to raise to do it, that they are going to put the money in. And the early returns are they've lived up to everything you could ask for. So I hope they're making money on the team because they deserve to be making money on the team. And it's also been a really long time, since we've had an ownership group that looks devoted to the idea of this is a public trust. If you build it, they will come. If we make the tent really big again and make it open and want you to be part of it. Dan Quinn is preaching this over and over and over. Be part of this, be part of this, be part of this, be part of this. And all coaches and players, I think, want that. His is genuine. When I hear him say it, be part of this. And it's great when you hear the ownership do it, because for so long, we had an ownership that was arm's length away. It felt like they were taking advantage of a fan base, that they were squeezing out every nickel they possibly could. They were letting things go into disarray. They were blaming others for their issues or being absent and disappearing, which is what ended up happening over the last few years. It was almost like he threw his hands up and said, well, there's nothing I can do about this. You take care of it, Bruce. And that was really it. And Bruce happened to be not a nice guy, and is not empowered to do anything to make you feel all warm and fuzzy when you're coming over. It was the most awkward Thanksgiving dinner of all time. All of a sudden you get this new group in here, and the new group is ray of sunshine. And it's not just the way they're interacting, what they're talking about, explaining why they're doing what they're doing. And I like to point out here, because I see it, the amount of resources they've put in to improve the organization, whether the fans see it or not. You're going to end up feeling it. The team plays better. The team feels better. The team's going to look better probably soon. Stadium's on its way. The stadium they have now, they're doing the best they can. I mean, that's sunk cost money. That stadium's going to get raised in 5 to 6 years. They're still putting millions and millions of dollars into it because they want it to feel like the best experience it can be for this interim period of time. And I'm glad to hear that, I've wanted to point out a lot. Don't forget their role in all of this. Their role in all of this is very important too. Adam Peters has a robust staff. Dan Quinn has a robust staff. None of the coaches ended up leaving. Some of that was they didn't get poached enough, but they didn't. Players want to play here now, even though the facilities aren't the best and the stadium isn't the best and they haven't won a lot in a long time. The owners have a lot to do with that. And it's good to hear that that's what's coming out here.
One of the things that he actually talks about just very specifically is he talked about, I guess there was only 1 or 2 cold plunge tubs or something like that. Yeah. And he was like, well, I do this. Those only cost $6,000. And then he was like, well, then someone tells me, well, because you're dealing with 250, 350 pound linemen, you need to buy the $10,000, $12,000 version of that. And he was like, okay, do it. Just very simple things that were, yes, expensive, but he's going, if it makes their life easier, I want it to happen. And he turned to A-Rod and basically said, A-Rod, the plane ride, the eating, all of that stuff, it's almost just as important. And A-Rod literally, without even thinking, goes, it's more important. We care about that more than what happens on the field. He and especially baseball, of course, right?
You want to be treated well. You want to be treated well. Like, I think, like, in general, I think some people lose sight of what being treated well and what being treated ridiculously are. And, you know, like, but like, you want to be treated well, and it's important. And if your work environment, the coffee machine never works, eventually you just look at your employer and you're like, when are you going to get this fixed? And it becomes these little nagging things that always kind of sit there. It's like when you hear about the Bengals and they make their players pay for a bagel and you're like, are you kidding? It's like, it's such the easiest fix, and it costs you nothing to like not have them annoyed. You know, like, and so they see that, they understand that, and they're spending a tremendous amount of money. There's got to be a limit. But even think about last year, like, remember, they did 3 week-long trips. You know how expensive that is to go away with the entire team for a week? And they did it twice in the preseason. Those were both road games they did that at. We went to New Jersey for the Jets thing for like 4 or 5 days. We went to Miami for 4 to 5 days. They said, we want to go straight from Cincinnati to Arizona. They did. Like, not everybody does that. That's the ownership saying, okay, if you think it makes you better, if it thinks you build team chemistry, if you think this is good for us, we'll spend the money to do it. Don't lose sight of what a cost like that is. And they've been open-minded to all of it. Now, there's got to be a limit, obviously. Like, not everybody's going to get a Learjet. So, like, there's got to be a limit to what they're going to do. But they've been very open-minded and open arms to, what do you need? And as long as they stay, I think, within reason or even above reason, honestly, the answer's been, okay, go ahead, do that. Like, they didn't have to remove that dumb field, but they did it because it was an eyesore. And they're like, we just want another field here and make it look modern and new. So they spent, I don't know what it costs to do that when they didn't need another field. The players have not, like, I've been in their locker room a million times at the facility. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I've been in other locker rooms. It's not great. It's not new. It's older, but there's nothing. It's not like decrepit or like terrible. Maybe there were some plumbing issues that came out a couple of years ago, but it wasn't bad. But the players wanted something better. They said, okay, we'll do that. And they're fixing them and they're giving it a new locker room. They're open-minded because they want everybody to feel comfortable, like their workplace environment. And if you do, you often win. And that comes with everywhere we've worked. Like, you know, when you're in the offices that are like, I don't know, man, no one gives a crap around here.
Right.
And when, like, going and asking for something simple gets this, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. And like,
right.
Really? Like, you can't do something simple to make me happy. Do you value me? Right. And, you know, this team has gone, in my opinion, above and beyond in their ownership at this point. And I think that that's part of the story here. When the players enjoy their workplace, and a lot of it has to do with Dan Quinn, he deserves it. A lot of it has to do with Adam Peters. A lot of it has to do with they are picking the right people that are nice people that get along with one another, that are all kind of in it for the right reasons. But the ownership is also laying out an environment for all of them to perform and to succeed in. And I think it's worth mentioning. Don't lose sight of it. Like, we've seen what ownership can be at its worst. Like, you can see what that looks like. And it's funny because with Snyder, I really don't think actually expense or paying for something was something that, like, I don't think you could approach him about. He wanted the best of the best for himself, for sure, but he wanted the best of the best in general. As time went by, though, and the losing mounted and the criticism mounted and the investigations mounted, he just backed off entirely, and it just became kind of a loose run ship with nobody controlling the purse strings, because who knows where the owner is and how, you know, involved he is. And it just became a wayward franchise. That's not what's going on here anymore, obviously.
Well, I think, I'm glad you mentioned Snyder here as well, is when you think about Dan, when he got the team, he couldn't have inherited, I mean, I know he bought the team, but he couldn't have inherited a better brand, right? Where you just, as a public trust, you didn't have to do much to keep the fans around here. Get a team that tries really hard. Have an organization that does some of the right things. They did literally everything wrong. I think maybe the best thing Dan ever did was get Joe Gibbs back here. That was probably the best thing that ever happened. But, like, even then, the game had passed Joe by. And
you know, I mixed on the beginning of the Snyder era, more so than I think others, because I lived it and reported on it. And I really actually think his intentions were to make the organization great.
Sure.
He just, and I think genuinely, like, he really wanted them to be a superpower of the NFL. He just didn't know how to go about it.
Right.
And I think, like, as time went on, if we start talking about really RG3 on and the decisions that were made there, it's actually a different organization than the one that was there early. They made a lot of mistakes in terms of all the roster building choices, the dysfunction, the hiring and firing of coaches, and all the other little things that went along with it, charging people to go to training camp, which lets scouts get into, like, all the little things but in the beginning, his goal was to have a championship team, and it was a singular goal, and he went about it the wrong way. But I think people forget that his intentions didn't end up being like they were in the last 10 years of his ownership, like they were in the first 10 years of his ownership.
I think, though, what I was going to get at here was he went against public trust very fast. The charging of training camp, the upping of season tickets when they were having losing seasons, the free agent signings without thinking about how players would fit in. All of a sudden, it did become a thing of, God, this guy just doesn't know what he's doing. And what happened was we found out, I would say a decade into his ownership, that, I would say less than a decade, but really it took a lot of time for it to set in, that he didn't care about the fan, that the public trust is really what eroded this fan base faster than anything, because this team could have won and he could have done that and people would have swallowed it. But because they were losing and he was nickel and diming you and there were all these controversies and everything that would pile up, the public trust eroded so freaking fast, really, when you think, or so slowly. And then think about how fast it came back last year, though. And I kind of had a comparison on my show yesterday about how ownership groups now, it's a fast turn, either good or bad, because your fanatics now get to pay attention to everything you do in a way that they haven't before, right? Social media and following what your organization does has been easier than ever. And I kind of made a comparison, not this past year, but last year. Remember, you and Archer went to Fenway for opening day to see the Orioles, right? And you were like, man, there's going to be tough tickets. And I was like, actually, they're not. Those fans have revolted against that ownership group. And if I would have told you 15 years ago, Red Sox fans were revolting against their ownership group and not going to opening day, you would have called me crazy. But at the same time, they're going, this ownership group's not trying to win. They don't want to go to games. Think about that. Now you look at this organization and the Commanders, where it was so eroded, but literally a 1 year, really 2 years, because we talked about the stadium stuff 2 seasons ago, not just last season, but 2 years of, hey, we're putting all this money into the team, into the facilities. We brought in a new team president, a new head coach. We have a new face of the franchise, and they started to win on top. Look how quick it flipped with just the fan feeling as well. And that's also in the face of, in a rebranded team as well that, we talk about at length at least every couple weeks, it seems like, at this point. I think right now what's happening too is Josh Harris realizes that essentially when you invest in the fan base, even just a little bit, they realize, okay, I'm okay spending my money, spending my time, going to the stadium, buying stuff. Like, he just gets it. Like, we happen to actually be a priority because he realizes you invest in the fan base, you actually, will get that back in turn.
I talked a lot about this previously with the previous ownership where, because of my position, I do a lot of appearances. And every time the same thing happened, like, we would go into a room, it'd be a panel, it'd be me and others or just me, and you'd open it up to questions. And the questions would always start with something on the field. What do you think of this quarterback? What do you think of this? What do you think of the very normal, and, they could be heated about the results, but at least it was football. And then somebody invariably would ask a Dan Snyder question and the air would go out of the room and you could feel the anger. Like, you could just feel it. It's the Republican town halls now. You could just feel the anger building. And I always felt like the anger was good, that apathy is what I'm scared of. Like, apathy. If people don't care, you don't have a team that matters. If people are angry, it means they care. And so hopefully things can get fixed, and it's on its way to getting fixed. And the more I've thought about Snyder, and I know I've been like kind of defensive of him early in his career because I think people lop the whole thing and call it a giant failure. I actually think it was in a couple stages. The first act was a failure, but it wasn't because he wasn't trying to win. He was just going about it the wrong way. And, to everybody's point, started taking the fan base for granted, and it started eroding it through time, then seemed to get mad that his efforts, while they weren't working on the field, were not being acknowledged, that he was trying to help the team win. And he's a tough interview. Like, he unfortunately, his personality was very tough with the media, and he didn't resonate very well. So he needed to talk less because he'd say something and then it wouldn't go well, or he'd say something and then it would become a big news thing, and then it would go the wrong way. But in the beginning, it was different. And I've thought about this. What the most interesting part of it is, oftentimes you take over something like this. Whoever buys the Celtics is buying a team that just won a championship a year ago and has a championship caliber team and has this history that they have to deal with. So the expectation is the Boston Celtics are always going to be good and always going to be vying for championships. Dan Snyder didn't buy the Redskins when they were off of a championship run. In fact, he bought them when they were 7-8 years removed from that, in a stadium that people didn't particularly like already, and with a coach that people didn't particularly like at that point in time. And so it wasn't that long ago when he got them, but he didn't land on them in the middle of the dynasty with Joe Gibbs as the coach, where he had to make decisions about what they were going to do to keep that brand going. It's actually a better spot to be in. And that's where, when the Harris group got the Commanders, the bar is very low, right? They exceeded it exponentially early, which I think was part of the excitement of last year. It was unexpected how good it was, right? And now the expectations are different, which we can talk about. What next year looks like when you've done what you've done, all of a sudden the expectations are very, very, very different. But for their group, they got to have the fun, wild ride of, you didn't think we'd be this good this fast, because who would have thought they would have been that good that fast? Dan Snyder bought the team, and it wasn't that far away from the golden era, but they also hadn't made the playoffs since Joe Gibbs had left either. They were a team that was kind of muddling along, and finally got back to relevancy, 6-7 years later with those teams that he bought into. And yeah, he crumbled them and destroyed them, but he was in a better situation. I think people give him credit for. He wasn't following the legend. He had the bridge of where the team wasn't that good and still couldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, but that's 6-7 years in the NFL doesn't feel like 6 to 7 years.
Not when you're a dynasty,
right.
But go ask Patriots fans, because it hasn't been that long since Tom Brady left, and what the last few years feels like to them, because it's probably very foreign because it's been so long, where they're like, what the hell is going on here?
Sure. One difference that I will say is this, though, is what I really didn't like about Dan, and don't get me wrong, the off the field stuff, this is all aside, but I get it. You did not build the stadium out in Landover. You inherited that. And I understand that. But the fact
He never made it better.
Correct.
This ownership group walked in and decided they want to make it better. Yes.
And so that's where, I think my anger has actually grown about that more over the last 2 years than anything else, because that's the difference between a good leader and a bad leader. A bad leader goes, oh, well, I couldn't control this, so, it just is what it is. And then Josh Harris comes in and goes, I need to spend how much money just to get the infrastructure back up to snuff, and then spend money on the light shows, the parking, the murals, all that? Fine. Within 2 years, that stadium has become the best version of itself, which is ridiculous to think about. And it's going to be gone in 5 years, or not be used like that in 5 years. And that, to me, I think is actually where the perspective has come in with me with Harris is, I trust this guy with just about everything, because that's a leader that goes, okay, this is crappy. How do I make this better for everyone else involved? Because I think that's what irks me the most is Dan can tell me he didn't build the stadium. He can tell me that stadium was rushed, because it was notoriously rushed, right? There wasn't even a club level, really. There wasn't a luxury seating situation, because it was built so fast, because Jack Cook wanted the stadium built before he died. I understand that. But now looking at what Harris has done in 2 years, I'm like, what gives, man? You didn't really actually care. You didn't care more than I thought you didn't care about this. And I think that's where I've landed here with Harris is, oh, wow, this guy actually really, truly gets it and knows I need to make the fan experience better no matter how long I'm here. to, kind of win everyone back.
Yeah, it's like, you buy a house that needs to be redone. A couple of the toilets don't work. And you go, well, I didn't break the toilets. They were broken before I got here. And you're like, but don't you want to fix them? And he's like, well, it's not my problem.
Well, sewage built on your friends, that's not, yeah.
It is your problem now, and in a couple of years, they've done a lot. They've done a tremendous amount to it for money that is, in a stadium, it's not going to be here hopefully in 5-6 years. So it's pretty amazing. So I'll listen to that. This was not in our pre-show meeting. I did not intend to talk about Josh Harris and what the ownership group has done, but then this is what you get when you don't plan what you're going to speak about. But hey, you land where you land. All right, I'll talk about today's team and the OTAs next. Bram watch the show. Be at 6:30, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. OTAs today, round 2. It's the end of the voluntary program this week. We will get to see a full practice today, talk to Dan Quinn, etc. And then next week is the mandatory mini camp. So everyone's going to show up, I would assume, unless Terry's a holdout. So because we haven't heard of any deal yet, so we'll just have to see what that is. And again, even if we get there, and maybe things change, over the next week or so, even if we get there, I will reiterate, I'm not worried about him. Like, I know that a deal's going to get done. It's probably just about term and money. He wants to be here. They want him here. This is not an acrimonious thing. It's just about getting what is a complicated deal done with somebody because it's a high-priced one. So, I believe it will get done one way or the other. And everything I've heard is there's no issue. It's just, they've got to work this thing out, and the agent and Adam Peters have to work it out. So we'll see what that ends up being. But today, because it is still voluntary, I do think I would like to see, it won't be me, but I would like to see a reporter or two ask specific questions about the other two if they're not here again. Now, I'm going to go out there today, and maybe they're good by the time you hear this. Marshawn Lattimore and Laramie Tunsil may be there, and they may not. So if they're not, I think today's the day. I've learned this through the years. If you don't ask it very specifically, you will not get a specific answer from the team. And I'd like to hear what is the position on both of them and why are they not here, and see what they say. Is it contract related? Is it just their veterans? What is it? And hear what the position is on both of them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just want to hear. I want to hear what they know about it too, because we've had, what was it? I forget. Was it him? Was it Quinn that basically said, I want to be in contact with you, whether it's in the season or the off season? I think it was him. Yeah. So I want to know, has he heard from either of those guys? Does he know what's going on? And as I said, Lattimore's pick your own adventure right now. It could be he's a veteran. It could be he wants a new contract. It could be he's still banged up for all we know. He's got a bunch of different reasons.
It could be D, all of the above, too.
It could be a combination of all that. Tunsil at least has a history of this. Like the Texans reporters right away were basically saying he usually doesn't do this, so don't be shocked here. And once again, I'll say what I said too. I feel like the work for OTAs is a little bit different. Like linemen aren't hanging and banging, they're not hitting each other. It's very much light work. Wide receivers and DBs do get a little bit more work in because it is coverage, it is catching, it's all of that stuff. So the work is a little bit different here too. I'd like to see Lattimore. And once again, I have to reiterate all of this by saying it's all with a grain of salt. It is all actually voluntary. They don't have to be there at the end of the day.
No, they don't have to be there at the end of the day. And that's the thing you can't lose sight of. It's just we've gotten accustomed to, because this coach has fostered an environment in a short period of time where everybody shows up. Frankie Louvu doesn't have to be there if he doesn't want to be there. Debo technically doesn't have to be there if he doesn't want to be there. Jaden doesn't have to be there if he didn't really want to be there. But that's not what's happening. And when someone isn't there, it stands out. And especially when it's someone new in these cases where you go, hey, don't you know what the deal is over here? This is how we do things over here. And that's why I think it stands out a little bit. In Tunsil's case, also, it's different. Like, they just traded for him. They even went out of their way to say, even though this is not totally true, they're like, the only position on the offensive line where there's not competition is that one. Tyler Biadasz is the center. Like, there's no, when Sam Cosmi's healthy, he's the right guard. Like that. So it's like semi untrue, but it was like an acknowledgement of, we know who this person is. And I will tell you, like, when they acquired Tunsil, I talked to the people I know around the league, and I know people on every team. So I talked to the people who are around the teams, and they warned is the wrong word, but they basically said about him, they're like, this is how it was put to me. They're like, he's really, really good. He also knows that. So don't expect him to be overly available to talk to you. He doesn't feel like he needs to and doesn't love doing it, even though his first press conference, I was like, oh, I like this guy. You know, like, he's got a lot to say, but I've heard he won't do a lot of it. And secondarily, that, like, you know, he's, you know, diva's the wrong word, but it's just more like he knows he's great. So he doesn't need to convince you of it. And he kind of knows that. And so I think this one is just a veteran thing, that he's like, I don't go to this. I don't need to go to this. At Club DQ, we kind of feel differently about that, but he doesn't. That's what I think. You know, I don't know. So if he's not there again today, I'd like to see a specific question on him. The Lattimore one is way more, to me, complicated. It very simply could be he's a veteran and doesn't do these things. But considering the injuries he had, the contractual situation where there's no guaranteed money, the need for him to get better, and, you know, I think something that would be desirous of, aren't you on board with everything that's going on here? His is just a little bit different than Tunsil's is right now.
I think you said it better. The need to get better from him, I think, is why everyone is questioning this one. Because if there was one player that, you know, value is something that, you know, puts expectations on players. So when you trade a couple of draft picks to get a cornerback last year, and he was banged up, and when he was in on the biggest moments of the season, lost his cool, right? Had these very polarizing moments. This is what happens when you miss stuff like this. We have to magnify it a little bit, right? Like, there's a reason why Terry McLaurin is entering year 7. There's not a single person worried about that guy showing up to training camp and being the stud that he is and getting another 1,000-yard season with the best quarterback he's ever played with, right? So with Lattimore, the difference here is pretty much since he's shown up, it's just always been something. He's hurt. He doesn't make his debut for, you know, a month or whatever it was after the trade deadline. Then when he does play, it's a mixed bag. Then in the NFC Championship game, AJ Brown and him fight each other, and then he's just not that. He's not what we expected him to be, and now all of a sudden you're not showing up to this. It's just things that mount with a player like that, whereas the opposite with McLaurin, and I would put Tunsil in McLaurin's category too. He's got a track record. I'm good. I'm not worried about that guy.
Yeah,
I understand.
Here, that's all. That's the only difference. Like, I'm not worried about McLaurin. I just know him, so I'm like, I'm not worried about him. Tunsil, I'm not worried about him, but I don't know him.
Sure. No, I'm with you on that. I will say, though, his track record on the field last year was fine for me to not really worried about it, is what I'm getting at.
Real quick, I wanted to show this. ESPN did a piece on 3 prominent players that likely could be traded at some point this summer, probably before training camp. One was Kirk Cousins. And obviously he's not coming here, and they tried to lay out the scenarios by which they thought he would go somewhere. Another was Jalen Ramsey, and of the experts they asked, what would the trade would you give, you know, to try to make this happen? Nobody listed the Commanders on it. So all of you that are having these kind of, and I know we talked about it a couple days ago, I would be interested in him if he was free and clear, but based on his contract and based on probably what they want, I don't. And considering they haven't cut him, I think they are in trade talks with others. So I just don't anticipate him coming here. But Trey Hendrickson still remains kind of out there. And they asked all the experts, what do you think the trade offer would be and from who? And one of them, Seth Walder, we've cited he does a lot of stat stuff, cited the Commanders, who obviously need an edge rusher. And this is what he offered the Bengals from Washington. And obviously this is not a report. This is just here's what I think they would offer that could possibly make the deal get done. And he named a player in here, not the one I thought he would name, but he named a player in this deal that he offered to him. And he said this: the Bengals would get Johnny Newton, a 3rd-round pick next year, and a 7th-round pick in 2027. And they wrote this: why this deal makes sense for both sides. Washington's in win-now mode, but Dorrance Armstrong's the best edge rusher. Adding Hendrickson, who recorded the 2nd-best pass rush win rate at edge last year, would be a huge boost. Losing Newton would make an old defense older, but the Commanders have strong veteran options on the interior interior line in Deron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, Dietrich Wise, who can move inside if they have to. By including Newton in the deal, the Commanders can put together a feasible package without a second-round pick. The others who put in offers put in a lot of second-round picks in there because that they lost as part of the trade for Laramie Tunsil. So, again, this is just someone throwing something out there. I kind of felt like, too, when all this Hendrickson stuff bubbled up, I went, I bet they include a player, to Cincinnati to try to make this done, to limit the draft assets that would have to go to do something like this. I didn't necessarily pick him, but that wasn't something that totally shocked me when he named him in something like that. So I don't know. We'll see.
I'd be very open to that. I also, though, do kind of come with that caveat if you're making a defense a little bit older. I will say, though, you're taking a little bit of a downgrade at tackle to then upgrade your weakest position. I would be completely at peace with that. And I will say, though, that one stings a little because then all of a sudden you're staring at a draft where you have a first-round draft pick and then you jump to the fourth round. Like, that's a tough one to swallow a little bit, I'm sure, for Adam Peters. But I understand the window is what the window is right now, and that would make you significantly better for a couple of years.
Yeah, I also, but I would say this. If others are offering you a second-round pick, he was a high second-round pick. Why would you add 2 extra picks on top of that? I would try to make, if that's what was something that was realistic. And again, this is just a reporter throwing out something. Sure. And in the end, they said, who do you think is going to get him? And the ESPN experts all agreed that the Lions look like the type of team that would end up getting them. And not unlike Washington, they're kind of in this mode where it's kind of load up. Let's get it done. Aiden Hutchinson and Trey Hendrickson together, healthy, scary edge rushers, out there. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram Boston Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Let me spend a few moments on what I thought was a surprise yesterday, which was the firing of Tom Thibodeau from the New York Knicks after coming within 2 games of making the NBA Finals, which the Knicks have not been in like my adult lifetime. Here's my just general read on it. They were going to fire him no matter what. They didn't expect them to beat Boston, which is why it seems odd now. But they were definitively going to do it after they lost to Boston. Then they didn't lose to Boston, and they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I guess they can try, if they answered questions, because their owner and their president of basketball operations doesn't do interviews and haven't in forever. They just put out statements, which is terrible and awful. But I think if they were being honest, they would tell you this was happening. It just feels surprising to you because we overachieved. I think that's actually, if they were being honest, is what they would say.
I think this one's a catch-22 firing. With Thibodeau, we know he's not really a player's coach. He grinds his starters into the ground throughout the entire season, right? That's what we know about him. The second he was hired, everybody was saying, watch out, whoever starts for that team.
Shelf life. It's a shelf life.
Correct.
You're going to win. He's going to get the best out of you. You're going to hate him in year 3.
Yes. And so here's year 5. And what I would make this argument is I saw some Knicks fans tweeting some things that we used to say as Caps fans. And they were like, they need to fire him because the next coach, they can elevate them to another level. And I remember kind of thinking when they got eliminated by Indiana, kind of going, how do you know he's not the coach that's elevating you to this point? And the next one might not be able to do that. And I could be wrong on that, but I feel like that might be the case here. And I will say this. Dolan tends to be a little reactive on what he sees, the other team do. We talk about what happened with the Capitals and the Rangers 5-6 years ago, right? Where horrifying act of violence. He then fired the coach and the GM, and the Rangers had a total revamp, and then they became the 1 seed last year. And then this past year, they sucked, right? I think what happened here is Dolan saw the effort happening with the Pacers and was going, how come my team's not trying like that? How come my team's not fighting every single possession like it's the last possession of a game? And I think that pisses an owner off like that. And so I think he pretty much went into this one going, I want a new head coach because I want my team to try harder. That's what I kind of landed on yesterday.
As for who's next, I don't know the answer to that. I would, if I were him, since we're talking about effort and all that stuff, I would try to see if you can get Spoelstra out of Miami, personally. That's what I doubt it, but that's where I would look. I wouldn't go after an old, like fourth go around coach, no offense to any of them, but like, I just wouldn't do that. My gut says it's going to be the UConn coach that I think like after he had a very weird year in college basketball, after turning down the Lakers, all of a sudden, I think he may be thinking differently about it. And he also doesn't have to move, which was a big deal. He could stay in the Northeast. So I think if they make a real offer to Dan Hurley, I think he will take it. He could go back to college in 3 years if he had to, no problem. Would he be able to have the same success at a different place? Maybe, maybe not. But if he was going to do this, I would do it with this team if I were him, because regionally, it's exactly where he wants to be. I don't think Jay Wright's going to take that job because Jay Wright has said over and over and over he does not want to coach anymore. So I don't, and I know because of the Villanova connection, they keep saying that. I don't think so, and I'm not sure that'd be the right thing to do considering he's been kind of out of it and never coached in the NBA. Like I think that's like kind of a crazy thing to do. Hurley makes sense to me. I'd try to poach Spoelstra if there was a way to get him out because you're looking for someone who plays that way, that hard, culture-ish, all that type of stuff. I would think about him, and he's in a situation where that team can't win anymore right now because they're not built to win at the moment. Like Riley may have screwed that roster up a little bit, which is unusual to say, but it feels that way a little bit. That's who I'd try to talk to. Jason Kidd's available. I'm sure he wants that job very badly. I don't know if I would go that direction. I'm sure Rivers would love to try to leave Milwaukee and go there. So I think there's a lot of options for them. It is a very good team. You don't know what they're going to do in the offseason. My gut says Hurley, but I don't know the way they're going to go. And I think there's a line out the door of veteran coaches trying to get that gig because of who's on that team right now.
I will say this too, though, that you're going to have some coaches be a little apprehensive about the assets coming because they had 5 first-round picks, unprotected first-round picks traded for that Bridges trade. That's like your gold in today's NBA, and you don't have any of that coming in. So I will say I think there will be some people that are apprehensive about the assets that they have moving forward as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would, if I'm them, I think off of this, considering how reactionary this feels, and this is what I'm saying, I don't think it actually was. I think they intended to fire him. I think they intended to fire him when they lost in the playoffs earlier because they went as far as they did. That's why it feels surprising. Had they made the finals, there's no way they could do this. Like, no way. And the crazy part is, had they not blown game 1 the way they had blown it, they probably would be in the finals. That's the nuttiest part of it because it would have gotten to like game 7 and then it really would have felt really crazy that they did it. So we'll see who they end up with. Last thing real quick. Stanley Cup Final begins tonight. I got the Oilers. Give me the Oilers. McDavid puts his name on the cup. I agree with you actually that Florida's a better team. I got a funny feeling the Oilers have totally hit a stride. They score too much. I think they're going to find a way to win some high scoring games and they're going to win the cup.
I have said this from the get-go that the goaltending is going to be the difference in this one. Bobrovsky's been amazing in these playoffs. Give me him over Edmonton, essentially. I'm with you. I think this is a long series. This is a close series. Last year, I think I have to remind people, Florida won 3 in a row. Then the Oilers won 3 in a row. They went to overtime game 7.
That's right.
Like, that does give me a little bit, to be apprehensive about Florida here. I do think McDavid is possessed right now. Like, we're watching greatness right now. But I'll say this. Florida just has this makeup that you can't put your finger on for the Stanley Cup Final. I think it's going to be close. I think this does go 7 games. I have to give edge Florida here, mainly because they don't have the nerves. They're trying to repeat. They have one of the best playoff players, period, in Brad Marchand, who I love. I just think it's going to be edge Florida here, but I think it's going to be a 7-game series and it's going to be close. I just can't wait to see what McDavid does because since game 2 in that Dallas series, that dude has been even better than he's ever been before, and he's been really fun to watch.
All right, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.